Stepmother forces her stepdaughter to marry a homeless man as punishment. On their honeymoon, he makes a terrifying revelation. Before the story begins, comment below which city you're watching this video from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Enjoy the story, everyone. Alice Montgomery hurried down the bustling streets of Greenwich, Connecticut, her designer boots clicking against the pavement as she balanced a tray of coffee cups. The chilly autumn air nipped at her cheeks, turning them a rosy pink that matched her cashmere scarf. At 25, Alice was the picture of elegance and privilege, but unlike many of her peers in this affluent community, her heart remained untainted by wealth. "Excuse me, miss," a deep voice called out as she rounded the corner near the boutique-lined main street. Alice paused, turning to find a man sitting on a bench, his weathered face partially hidden beneath a worn beanie. Despite his shabby appearance, there was a quiet dignity in his posture that caught her attention. "I don't mean to bother you," he continued, his blue eyes startlingly clear against his unkempt beard, "but I think you dropped this." In his outstretched hand lay her silver bracelet, a cherished gift from her late mother. Alice gasped, instinctively touching her bare wrist. "Oh my goodness, thank you. I didn't even notice it fell off." She accepted the bracelet gratefully, noticing how the man's hands, though rough, handled the delicate piece with care. "I would have been devastated to lose this." "Looked important," he replied with a gentle smile. Alice hesitated, then impulsively offered him one of her coffee cups. "Please take this. It's freezing today." The man seemed surprised by the gesture, but accepted with a nod of thanks. As Alice watched, he took a small sip before offering some to an elderly woman huddled on a nearby bench. The simple act of sharing what little he had been given struck Alice deeply. "I'm Alice," she said, extending her hand. "Eric," he replied, his handshake firm despite his circumstances. "Nice to meet you, Alice." That brief encounter marked the beginning of what would become a daily ritual. Each morning, Alice would bring 2 coffees to the small park, where Eric could usually be found. Sometimes they talked for mere minutes, other times for an hour or more. She learned he was well-read and articulate, with knowledge that seemed incongruent with his current situation. He never asked for anything beyond her company, and she never pried into the circumstances that had led him to the streets. Unknown to Alice, her kindness had not gone unnoticed. From the tinted windows of her sleek black Bentley, Vanessa Montgomery observed her stepdaughter's growing friendship with undisguised contempt. At 45, Vanessa maintained the polished beauty that had first attracted Robert Montgomery, Alice's father, but her eyes had grown cold with calculation and spite. "She's becoming an embarrassment," Vanessa hissed into her phone as her driver navigated through Greenwich's exclusive neighborhoods toward their sprawling estate. First the volunteer work at that homeless shelter, and now she's personally befriending street people. What will the board members think when they see the Montgomery name associated with such squalor? On the other end of the line, her personal assistant murmured sympathetic agreement. "It's time I taught my dear stepdaughter a lesson about the real world," Vanessa continued, a plan already forming in her mind. "Find out everything you can about this vagrant. Everyone has secrets, especially those who have nothing to lose." Back at the Montgomery estate, Robert sat in his study, absently reviewing documents while his thoughts drifted elsewhere. Once a formidable business titan, he had gradually surrendered his authority to Vanessa after the passing of his first wife. The grief had hollowed him out, leaving a shell that Vanessa had expertly filled with her influence. When Vanessa swept into the room later that evening, her face was a perfect mask of concern. "Robert, darling, we need to discuss Alice," she began, perching on the edge of his desk. "I'm worried about her latest project." Robert glanced up, his eyes questioning. "Project? Is this about her charity work? You know how much it means to her." "This goes beyond charity, dear. She's becoming personally involved with a homeless man." Vanessa's voice dripped with manufactured worry. "It's not safe, and frankly it reflects poorly on the foundation. People are starting to talk." Robert frowned, setting down his pen. "Alice has always had a good head on her shoulders. I'm sure she's being careful." "Are you willing to stake the Montgomery reputation on that?" Vanessa countered sharply, then softened her tone. "I'm only thinking of her safety and our family's standing." As Robert wavered, Vanessa pressed her advantage. "I have a proposition that might solve everything. A way to show Alice the reality of her charitable impulses while protecting her from the inevitable disappointment." That night, as Alice prepared for bed, her phone chimed with a text from Eric. "Thank you for the books. Found shelter tonight due to rain. Stay warm." She smiled, placing her phone on the nightstand. Outside her window, storm clouds gathered, mirroring the unseen tempest brewing within her own home. Little did she know that her simple act of kindness had set in motion a chain of events that would unravel decades-old secrets and forever change the course of multiple lives. The Montgomery mansion gleamed like a palace under the morning sun, its marble columns and manicured gardens a testament to generational wealth. Inside the opulent dining room, Alice picked at her breakfast, unaware of the calculating gazes fixed upon her. "Alice, dear," Vanessa's voice cut through the silence, honeyed yet sharp. "Your father and I would like to discuss something important with you." Alice looked up, noting her father's uncomfortable shifting in his seat. A familiar knot formed in her stomach. Whenever Vanessa used that particular tone, unpleasantness inevitably followed. "We've been concerned about your charitable activities lately," Vanessa continued, dabbing the corner of her mouth with a silk napkin. "Specifically your involvement with that homeless man. His name is Eric," Alice corrected quietly, "and he's a person, not an involvement." Robert cleared his throat. "Sweetheart, Vanessa is worried about your safety, and frankly, so am I. We don't know anything about this man." "I know he returned a priceless bracelet when he could have sold it," Alice countered. "I know he shares what little he has with others worse off than himself. What else matters?" Vanessa's smile tightened. "Such naivety is precisely my concern. You see the world through rose-colored glasses, Alice. Perhaps it's time for a dose of reality." Alice placed her fork down carefully. "What exactly are you suggesting, Vanessa?" "Your father and I have discussed this at length," Vanessa replied, ignoring the flicker of surprise that crossed Robert's face. "We think it would be educational for you to commit fully to your conviction that this man deserves your attention." "Educational?" Alice echoed, confusion evident in her voice. "Yes." Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with malice poorly disguised as concern. "If you believe so strongly in this man's character, perhaps you should marry him." The room fell silent. Even the staff froze, pretending to be invisible as they had been trained. "This is absurd," Alice finally managed, looking to her father for support. "Dad, you can't possibly agree with this." Robert wouldn't meet her eyes. "Vanessa thinks, and I'm beginning to see her point, that you need to understand the consequences of your choices. This fascination with charity cases has gone too far." "Fascination?" Alice's voice rose. "I'm showing basic human decency." "Call it what you will," Vanessa cut in smoothly, "but the ultimatum stands. Marry your homeless friend, or I'll be forced to reconsider your position within the foundation. The homeless shelter you're so passionate about receives significant funding from us. It would be a shame if that had to change." Alice stared in disbelief. "You're threatening the shelter to manipulate me. These are real people's lives you're playing with." "As are you," Vanessa countered coldly. "The Montgomery name carries responsibilities. If you're so determined to sully it with your associations, you might as well make it official." Robert finally spoke up, his voice weak with compromise. "It doesn't have to be permanent, Alice. Perhaps a year, to prove your point or learn from the experience." Alice looked between her father and stepmother, recognizing the trap closing around her. Vanessa had always resented her, especially her control over her mother's portion of the family fortune, which would fully transfer to Alice on her 30th birthday. This was just another move in their long-standing chess game. Across town, Eric shivered in the community center, one of the few places where he could shower and change into the clean clothes donated by local charities. As he carefully folded his worn jacket, a shadow fell across him. Mr. Eric Walker, a man in an expensive suit, stood before him, looking distinctly uncomfortable in these surroundings. Eric straightened, immediately on guard. "Who's asking?" "My name is Lawrence Phillips, legal counsel for the Montgomery family," the man replied, extending a card that Eric didn't take. "Mrs. Montgomery would like to meet with you. Today, if possible." "Montgomery?" Eric frowned, recognition dawning. "You mean Alice's family?" "Indeed. A car is waiting outside. Mrs. Montgomery is prepared to make it worth your while." Eric hesitated, instinct warning him of danger. Yet curiosity, and the mention of Alice compelled him to follow. The sleek Mercedes whisked him through neighborhoods of increasing opulence until they reached the Montgomery estate. Eric was led through marble hallways to a sun-drenched conservatory where Vanessa sat like a queen holding court. "Mr. Walker," she greeted without standing. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." Eric remained standing. "I prefer to know why I'm here first." Vanessa smiled thinly. "Direct. I appreciate that. I'll be equally direct. I have a business proposition for you. I'm not interested in charity, Mom." "Oh, this is far from charity," Vanessa laughed coldly. "I want you to marry my stepdaughter, Alice." Eric stared, certain he had misheard. "Excuse me?" "You heard correctly. Marry Alice. Stay married for 1 year. After that, divorce her quietly, and you'll receive $5 million. "This is insane," Eric replied, turning to leave. "I won't be part of whatever game you're playing." "Not even to help your friends on the streets?" Vanessa called after him. "Think of what $5 million could do: shelters, food programs, medical care for those who can't afford it." Eric froze, her words finding their mark. "And if you refuse," she continued, "I'll ensure that the shelter Alice loves so much loses its funding. Hundreds will suffer because of your pride." "Why?" Eric demanded, turning back to face her. "Why do this to Alice?" Vanessa stood, crossing to a nearby table where she poured herself a drink. "Consider it a life lesson. Alice needs to understand that her actions have consequences. This marriage will show her the reality of the world she's so eager to save." As she raised her glass, a small brooch on her lapel caught the light. Eric's eyes fixed on it, a fragment of memory stirring, a similar pin, a man's laughter, a childhood bedroom with a view of the sea. "Do we have a deal, Mr. Walker?" Vanessa's voice snapped him back to the present. Eric's mind raced, weighing impossible choices. If he refused, people would suffer. If he agreed, he would be participating in a cruel deception against the one person who had shown him genuine kindness. "Unless, I want the terms in writing," he finally said, "and I want half the money transferred to a foundation for the homeless before the wedding." Vanessa's smile widened, victorious. "I knew you'd be reasonable. My lawyer will draw up the papers immediately." As Eric left the Montgomery estate, the weight of his decision pressed heavily upon him. What Vanessa didn't know, couldn't know, was that the brooch had awakened something within him. A past he had spent years trying to forget was suddenly pushing its way to the surface, demanding recognition. Back in her room, Alice wiped away tears of anger and frustration. Her phone buzzed with a text from the shelter coordinator. "Emergency board meeting called by your stepmother. Funding review on agenda." "What's happening?" Alice's hands shook as she replied, "I'll handle it." She had no idea how, but she would find a way to protect those who depended on her, even if it meant agreeing to Vanessa's outrageous demands. Rain pelted against the windows of the Greenwich Public Library, where Alice had asked Eric to meet her. She'd chosen a quiet corner, away from curious eyes and gossip-hungry ears. The text message she'd sent him had been cryptic. "Need to speak with you urgently. Not about the shelter. Personal." Eric arrived 15 minutes early, his hair still damp from the downpour. He'd managed to borrow clean clothes from a church donation box, and though they were slightly large, he looked more presentable than usual. The meeting with Vanessa Montgomery had left him deeply troubled, yet strangely resolute. When Alice appeared, her eyes were rimmed with red, betraying recent tears despite her composed demeanor. Eric felt a pang of guilt, knowing he was now entangled in whatever pain Vanessa was inflicting on her. "Thank you for coming," Alice said softly, sliding into the chair across from him. "I wouldn't have asked if it wasn't important." "I'll always come when you call," Eric replied simply, the honesty in his words surprising even himself. Alice took a deep breath. "My stepmother came to see you yesterday." It wasn't a question, but Eric nodded anyway. "She did. She told you about her proposition. $5 million to marry you and stay married for a year," Eric confirmed, "then divorce quietly and disappear." Alice's face crumpled slightly before she regained control. "I need to know what you told her." Eric studied Alice carefully, noting the vulnerability beneath her carefully maintained composure. In that moment, he made a decision that would alter both their paths. "I told her I would consider it," he said carefully, "but only under certain conditions. Half the money must go into a foundation for the homeless before the wedding, and I need guarantees that the shelters will continue to receive funding." Alice stared at him, confusion and something like betrayal flickering across her features. "You're actually considering this absurd arrangement?" "Not for the reasons she thinks." Eric leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Alice, something about your stepmother. There's more to this than her cruelty toward you." "What do you mean?" Eric hesitated. "I'm not sure yet. But when I was in her presence, she was wearing a brooch, an antique silver piece with a blue stone. It triggered memories." "Memories?" "Fragments. Nothing concrete." Eric ran a hand through his hair. "Listen, I know this sounds crazy, but I believe there's a connection between your stepmother and my past. This arrangement, as terrible as it seems, might be the only way for me to discover the truth." Alice sat back, processing his words. "So you'd agree to this farce of a marriage to investigate my stepmother?" "Partly," Eric admitted, "but also to ensure the shelters remain funded and to protect you." "Protect me?" Alice laughed bitterly. "From what? Public humiliation?" "Too late for that. Vanessa has already spread rumors about our engagement throughout Greenwich society." Eric's jaw tightened. "She works quickly." "She's nothing if not efficient when it comes to cruelty," Alice agreed. "But you should know, she's also threatening to fabricate criminal charges against you if I don't cooperate. Theft, harassment, stalking. She has the connections to make false accusations stick." "Of course she is," Eric muttered, anger flashing in his eyes. "Is there no depth to which she won't sink?" "Apparently not." Alice reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. "I can't let her hurt you, Eric. Not after all the kindness you've shown." Eric turned his hand to catch hers, the warmth of her touch sending an unexpected jolt through him. "And I can't let her manipulate you using threats against me. It seems we're both determined to protect each other." A fragile smile touched Alice's lips. "So where does that leave us?" "With a very unconventional engagement, it seems," Eric replied, attempting humor despite the gravity of their situation. "You would really go through with this?" Alice searched his face. "Marry a woman you barely know to satisfy my stepmother's twisted game?" "I would go through with this to protect someone who showed me kindness when most people couldn't see past my circumstances," Eric corrected. "And to perhaps uncover a truth that's been buried for too long." The library had begun to empty as closing time approached. Through the windows, the rain had slowed to a gentle patter, stars occasionally visible through breaks in the clouds. "If we do this," Alice said slowly, "we need rules, boundaries." Eric nodded. "Agreed. Separate living arrangements within the house Vanessa has generously offered us. A solid prenuptial agreement protecting both our interests. And complete honesty between us about what we discover." "Absolutely," Eric agreed. "And we present a united front to Vanessa. No matter what pressures she applies, we stand together." Alice studied him as if seeing him anew. "You're not what she expects, are you? She thinks you'll be malleable, grateful for the opportunity." A hint of a smile played at Eric's lips. "People often underestimate those they consider beneath them. It can be a useful advantage." As they left the library, walking together under Alice's umbrella, neither noticed the sleek black car parked across the street, nor the telephoto lens capturing their every move. Back at the Montgomery estate, Vanessa reviewed the photos her private investigator had sent to her phone. The sight of Alice and Eric walking close together, heads bent in conversation, only reinforced her conviction that her plan was progressing perfectly. "Lawrence," she called to her lawyer, who sat reviewing documents in an adjacent chair, "make the necessary arrangements. The wedding will take place in 3 weeks." 3 weeks? Lawrence looked up, startled. "That's unusually hasty, even for a civil ceremony." "I want this matter resolved quickly," Vanessa replied, her fingers absently touching the antique brooch at her collar, "before anyone starts asking inconvenient questions." In his hotel room, paid for by Vanessa as a gesture of goodwill, Eric lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The soft bed felt alien after years of makeshift accommodations, yet it wasn't comfort that kept sleep at bay. It was the brooch. The same distinctive piece his father had commissioned for his mother's birthday, just months before the accident that had supposedly claimed their lives. The accident Eric had miraculously survived, only to be swept into the foster system and eventually onto the streets when trauma and instability had made normal life impossible. The brooch his mother had been wearing the day of the yacht explosion, The brooch that should have been lost at sea. The brooch now worn by Vanessa Montgomery. Across town in her childhood bedroom, Alice also lay awake. On her nightstand sat the latest prenuptial agreement drafted by her own lawyers, not the firm her father and Vanessa used. The document ensured that her inheritance would remain protected and that the foundation she had established with her mother's estate would continue its work regardless of her marital status. What had begun as a cruel punishment had somehow transformed into a mystery waiting to be solved. And despite the circumstances, Alice couldn't deny the strange flutter in her chest when she thought of Eric. His quiet dignity, his unexpected wisdom, and the inexplicable feeling that beneath his rough exterior lay a story more complex than she could imagine. The exclusive Anderson Spa and Salon in downtown Greenwich rarely catered to clients like Eric Walker. Yet this morning, the staff had been instructed to provide their full range of services to the disheveled man who arrived in a Montgomery family car. Mrs. Montgomery insisted on the complete package, the salon director explained, eyeing Eric with professional assessment. Haircut, shave, massage, styling, and a meeting with our personal shopper. Eric shifted uncomfortably under her scrutiny. Is all this really necessary? According to Mrs. Montgomery, absolutely, the woman replied, gesturing toward a private suite. She mentioned something about not embarrassing her stepdaughter completely. Her words, not mine. The transformation began immediately. Expert hands trimmed his overgrown hair, revealing a strong jawline and classical features that had been hidden beneath his beard. As layers of hardship were stripped away, the calluses softened, the weathered skin treated, the tension in his muscles released, a different man began to emerge. By afternoon, Eric stood before a full-length mirror, hardly recognizing himself. The tailored navy suit fit perfectly, accentuating broad shoulders and a naturally athletic build that years of deprivation hadn't entirely diminished. His hair, now expertly cut and styled, had a natural wave that the stylist had pronounced magazine-worthy. Without the beard and with proper grooming, he appeared younger, more vital, and oddly familiar, even to himself. "My God," breathed the salon director, circling him. "If I hadn't seen the before, I wouldn't believe it. You look like you stepped off the cover of Forbes." Eric stared at his reflection, unsettled by how easily he fit the image of wealth and privilege. There was something about his appearance now that tugged at his memory, a resemblance to someone he couldn't quite place. "Mrs. Montgomery also arranged for you to meet with etiquette coach," the director continued, checking her tablet. "She's waiting in the library room." 4 hours later, his head spinning with rules about place settings, proper introductions, and the intricacies of high society conversation, Eric was delivered to the guest house on the Montgomery estate. The small but luxurious building would be his home until the wedding, Vanessa had decided, to maintain appearances. As he entered, he found Alice waiting in the living room, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "They told me you were here," she said, rising from her seat. When she saw him, she froze, her eyes widening. "Eric? It appears I clean up well," he said wryly, uncomfortable under her stunned gaze. "That's an understatement." Alice circled him slowly. "You look like someone else entirely," Eric supplied. "No," Alice countered softly. "Like yourself, but without the hardship. Your eyes are still the same." Something in her gentle assessment touched him deeply. Not the superficial approval of the salon staff, but recognition of the person beneath the polished exterior. "Vanessa's doing?" she asked, gesturing to his transformation. Eric nodded. "Apparently I wasn't presentable enough for the Montgomery family wedding. She's orchestrating everything," Alice sighed, sinking back into her chair. "The ceremony, the reception, even the guest list. 300 of Greenwich's elite will witness her triumph." "Her triumph?" "My humiliation," Alice clarified. "Or so she thinks. She's portraying this as my rebellious phase taken to its logical extreme, the privileged heiress marrying a homeless man to spite her family." Eric sat across from her, loosening his tie. "And your father allows this narrative." Pain flashed across Alice's face. "My father hasn't been strong enough to stand against Vanessa since my mother died. He's a passenger in his own life now." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sounds of gardeners tending the main estate's grounds. "I've been researching the brooch," Alice finally said, opening a laptop on the coffee table. It's distinctive enough that I thought there might be records, and I found this." She turned the screen to show a newspaper article from 15 years ago. The headline read, "Yacht Explosion Claims Lives of Tech Mogul and Wife." Eric leaned forward, his heart pounding. The photograph showed a handsome couple at a charity gala, the woman wearing the exact brooch Vanessa now possessed. "Jonathan and Elena Barros," Alice read, "founders of Barros Tech, a pioneering cybersecurity firm. They disappeared after their yacht exploded off the coast of Maine. Their bodies were never recovered, but they were presumed dead. They had a son," her voice faltered. "Hudson," Eric whispered, the name emerging from some hidden recess of his memory. "His name was Hudson Barros." Alice's eyes widened. "How did you know that? It's not mentioned in this article." Eric's hands trembled as fragments of memory began aligning into coherent patterns. A house overlooking the ocean. A father's strong hands teaching him to sail. A mother's laugh as she fastened her favorite brooch to her dress. "Because I am Hudson Barros," he said, the words strange yet undeniably true. "Or at least I was." Alice stared at him, shock evident on her face. "But how? The reports say the son was lost in the explosion too." "I remember being thrown into the water," Eric said slowly, each word bringing more memories to the surface. "The cold, the burning debris. Someone found me on the shore. A fisherman, I think. I had hit my head. Couldn't remember much. Just my first name." He paced the room, years of suppressed memories flooding back. "The authorities assumed I was a runaway, placed me in foster care. I was difficult, angry, confused, having nightmares I couldn't explain. Bounced around the system until I aged out. Never found stability after that. But your parents, they were wealthy. There would have been relatives, family, friends looking for you. Unless someone wanted the Barros heir to remain missing," Eric said grimly. "Someone who stood to gain from controlling their fortune." The implication hung in the air between them. "Vanessa," Alice breathed. "But how would she be connected to your parents?" Eric turned to her, pieces falling into place. "What was Vanessa's name before she married your father?" Alice frowned. "Reynolds, I think. Vanessa Reynolds." Eric shook his head. "Before that. Her first marriage." "I don't know," Alice admitted. "She never talks about her life before my father. I always assumed she was divorced. Or widowed," Eric suggested. "We need to find out everything about her past. Bank records, legal documents, anything that might connect her to Jonathan Barros." A knock at the door interrupted them. One of the household staff stood there, her expression professionally neutral. "Miss Montgomery, your stepmother requests your presence for the final wedding dress fitting. The designer has arrived from New York." Alice cast a meaningful glance at Eric. "Tell her I'll be right there." When they were alone again, she reached for his hand. "We have 2 weeks until the wedding. Whatever Vanessa's hiding, we'll uncover it. Together." Eric nodded, still reeling from the revelations of his true identity. "Be careful around her, Alice. If she's gone to these lengths to hide her past—" "I know," Alice squeezed his hand. "She's dangerous, but she's also underestimated both of us. That will be her undoing." As Alice left for the main house, Eric returned to the newspaper article on the laptop. The faces of Jonathan and Elena Barros, his parents, stared back at him. Their features, once lost to amnesia and trauma, now seemed heartbreakingly familiar. His father's strong jaw, his mother's expressive eyes, features he now recognized in his own transformed reflection. In the master bedroom of the main house, Vanessa opened her safe and carefully removed a folder of documents. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The wedding would cement her control over both Alice's inheritance and what remained of the Barros fortune, which she had carefully hidden in offshore accounts after orchestrating the accident that had supposedly claimed her first husband and his family. The last loose end, the son she had believed perished, had miraculously reappeared. But soon he would be legally bound to Alice, controllable through the prenuptial agreement her lawyers had crafted. And when the year was over, Eric Walker would disappear again, this time permanently. Vanessa replaced the folder and closed the safe, unaware that her carefully constructed world was already beginning to unravel. St. Matthew's Episcopal Church, the crown jewel of Greenwich's religious establishments, buzzed with anticipation on the morning of what society columns had dubbed the wedding of the decade, not for its romance or splendor, but for its sheer audacity, the Montgomery heiress marrying a former homeless man. In a private room off the sanctuary, Alice stood in her wedding gown, a masterpiece of silk and lace that made her look like a vision from another era. Despite the circumstances, she couldn't help feeling a flutter of something unexpected when she thought of Eric waiting at the altar. Over the past weeks, their alliance had evolved into a genuine connection that neither had anticipated. "You look beautiful, darling," came a familiar voice from the doorway. Alice turned to see Eleanor Blackwell, her mother's oldest friend and the closest thing to a maternal figure she had left. At 70, Eleanor remained formidable, a sharp-witted widow who had never quite approved of Vanessa. "Eleanor, I didn't think you'd come." Alice embraced the older woman, careful not to wrinkle her dress. "And miss the chance to see what you're plotting?" "Never." Eleanor's eyes twinkled with mischief. "This charade has your mother's spirit written all over it. Catherine never took humiliation lying down either." Alice smiled, remembering her mother's quiet strength. "You know me too well." "Indeed." Eleanor adjusted Alice's veil. "Now tell me about this young man. He must be extraordinary for you to go to such lengths." "He is," Alice admitted, surprised by the warmth in her voice. "Not in the way Vanessa expected, though. There's more to his story than anyone realizes." Eleanor's expression grew serious. "Speaking of stories, I've brought something that might interest you." She reached into her handbag and withdrew an old photograph. This was taken at the Barroses' summer gala 15 years ago. Alice accepted the photo, her heart racing as she recognized the subjects, Jonathan and Elena Barros, alongside a younger, barely recognizable Vanessa. Her arm was wrapped possessively around Jonathan's waist, while Elena stood slightly apart, her discomfort evident. Vanessa was Jonathan's personal assistant before Elena died, Eleanor explained. There were rumors. Nothing concrete, but Catherine never trusted her. When Vanessa appeared on Robert's arm barely a year after the Barrows tragedy, your mother was beside herself. Alice stared at the photo, pieces clicking into place. "Eleanor, this changes everything. May I keep this?" "Of course, dear. Now, I believe I've spotted someone interesting among the guests, an old gentleman who seems oddly familiar." Before Eleanor could elaborate, the door swung open and Vanessa swept in, resplendent in a designer suit that screamed wealth and power. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of Eleanor, but her smile remained fixed. "Alice, darling, it's almost time. Eleanor, what a surprise to see you here." Eleanor returned a smile equally cold. "I wouldn't miss my goddaughter's wedding for the world, Vanessa. I was just telling Alice how much this day would have meant to Catherine." Vanessa's jaw tightened imperceptibly. "How thoughtful. If you'll excuse us, Alice needs a final moment with her father before the ceremony." As if on cue, Robert Montgomery entered, looking distinguished, yet somehow diminished in his formal attire. His eyes brightened at the sight of his daughter. "You look just like your mother," he whispered, emotion making his voice rough. Eleanor squeezed Alice's hand and slipped the photograph into her clutch. "I'll see you inside, dear." With a pointed look at Vanessa, she added, "Truth has a way of coming to light, doesn't it?" After Eleanor left, Vanessa turned to Robert. "Darling, would you mind giving me a moment with Alice? Last-minute stepmotherly advice." Once alone with Alice, Vanessa's demeanor changed instantly. "I see your mother's watchdog is still interfering. Whatever nonsense Eleanor has filled your head with, remember our arrangement. One misstep in that church and your precious shelters lose everything." "I understand perfectly," Alice replied evenly. "Shall we get this charade underway?" Meanwhile, at the altar, Eric shifted uncomfortably in his custom-tailored tuxedo. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of recovered memories and shocking discoveries. With Alice's help, he had pieced together enough of his past to be certain of his identity as Hudson Barrows, and of Vanessa's involvement in his parents' deaths. What they lacked was proof solid enough for authorities, though Alice's private investigator had promised breakthroughs soon. For now, they had to proceed with the wedding while gathering the final evidence. Eric's attention was drawn to an elderly man entering the church, leaning heavily on a cane. Something about him tickled Eric's memory. The distinctive white mustache, the military bearing despite his advanced age. The old man caught Eric's eye and froze, color draining from his weathered face. He mouthed a single word that Eric couldn't make out, then made his way determinedly toward the front pew. The wedding march began, and all eyes turned to the rear of the church where Alice appeared on her father's arm. She was breathtaking, her beauty magnified by the quiet dignity with which she carried herself despite the circumstances. As she reached Eric's side, he whispered, "You look incredible." "So do you," she murmured back. "Ready to expose a murderer?" Before he could respond, the minister began the ceremony. The familiar words washed over them as they exchanged glances laden with unspoken understanding. When they reached the moment for objections, a silence fell over the congregation. Vanessa smiled triumphantly from the front row, certain her victory was at hand. Then a voice rang out, wavering with age but resolute in purpose. "I object," declared the elderly gentleman, rising to his feet, "because this man is not Eric Walker. He is Hudson Barrows, son of Jonathan and Elena Barrows, and the rightful heir to the Barrows fortune." Gasps echoed through the church. Vanessa's face contorted with rage and shock. "Admiral Carter," she hissed, "you're mistaken. The Barrows family perished years ago." "No, Mrs. Montgomery, or should I say, Mrs. Barrows?" the old man countered. "I would recognize Jonathan's son anywhere. I was his godfather. And that brooch you're wearing belonged to Eleanor. It was found on her body when she washed ashore. The body you identified as hers, though the autopsy showed she had been dead before the explosion." Murmurs rippled through the stunned congregation. Robert Montgomery stared at his wife in growing horror. "This is absurd," Vanessa sputtered. "This homeless man is attempting a DNA doesn't lie, Vanessa," Alice interrupted, stepping forward. "We had tests run 3 days ago. Eric Hudson is indeed Jonathan Barrows' son, and the offshore accounts where the Barrows fortune disappeared, they trace back to you." Eric moved to Alice's side, his voice steadying as he addressed the assembled guests. 15 years ago, my parents died in what appeared to be a tragic accident. I survived but lost my memory. While I rebuilt my life on the streets, Vanessa Montgomery, who was then Vanessa Barrows, rebuilt hers with my family's wealth." The elderly admiral approached, tears in his eyes. "My boy," he said, his voice breaking, "we searched for you for years. When they found what we thought were your remains..." Vanessa's face had gone pale, her eyes darting toward the exits. "This is preposterous. Robert, surely you don't believe—" "The photograph, Vanessa," Alice said quietly, removing it from her clutch. "Eleanor recognized you immediately. You were Jonathan's assistant before you became his second wife, after Eleanor's suspicious accident." Robert took the photograph with trembling hands. "My God," he whispered, "what have you done?" 2 plainclothes detectives who had been posing as guests moved toward Vanessa, but with surprising agility she bolted for a side exit. "Stop her!" someone shouted, but it was Eric who reached her first, catching her arm as she fumbled with the door. 15 years, Vanessa. 15 years of my life you stole." Vanessa's face twisted with hatred. "You were supposed to be on that yacht. You should have died with them." Her words, spoken in rage, echoed through the hushed church, a confession heard by hundreds of witnesses. 6 months after what the press had dubbed the wedding that wasn't, Greenwich was still buzzing with the scandal's aftershocks. Vanessa Montgomery, now revealed as Vanessa Barrows, had been arrested that very day in St. Matthew's Church, her confession witnessed by hundreds of Greenwich's elite. The subsequent investigation had uncovered a web of deception spanning 15 years, falsified identification of remains, offshore accounts holding the embezzled Barrows fortune, and damning evidence suggesting she had tampered with the yacht's fuel line before conveniently missing the fatal voyage. The Montgomery mansion, once a symbol of old money and social prestige, stood empty now. Robert Montgomery, devastated by his wife's betrayal and his own unwitting complicity, had retreated to their property in the Berkshires, seeking solace and forgiveness through intensive therapy. His relationship with Alice remained strained but healing, their weekly conversations gradually rebuilding the trust that Vanessa had systematically destroyed. On a crisp October morning, Hudson Barrows, still occasionally answering to Eric, stood at the bow of a sleek sailboat navigating the waters of Long Island Sound. The wind tousled his hair as memories of sailing with his father flickered through his mind, no longer fragmented but flowing in a coherent stream. Each day brought new recollections, pieces of his identity slotting back into place after years adrift. "How does it feel?" Alice asked, joining him at the railing. The morning sunlight caught in her hair, creating a halo effect that made Hudson's heart skip. "Like coming home," he replied, adjusting the sail with practiced ease. "Though I never imagined I'd be doing this again." Alice smiled, understanding the layers in his words. The past months had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media frenzy, and personal rediscovery. Hudson had reclaimed his name, his heritage, and the substantial Barros fortune that Vanessa had hidden away. The transformation from homeless Eric to billionaire heir Hudson had been surreal, but throughout it all Alice had remained his steadfast ally. "Admiral Carter called this morning," she said, accepting the steaming mug of coffee Hudson offered. "He's feeling better after the surgery and wants to know when we'll visit again." "Tomorrow?" Hudson suggested. "I've been thinking about his offer to serve on the board of the Naval Veterans Foundation. It feels right, honoring my father's legacy that way." The elderly admiral, Hudson's godfather and his father's closest friend, had been instrumental in helping him reconnect with his past. Those connections had proven invaluable as Hudson navigated the complex process of reclaiming his identity and inheritance. They sailed in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythmic lapping of waves against the hull providing a soothing backdrop to their thoughts. Their relationship had evolved naturally after the chaos of the aborted wedding, deepening into something neither had expected when they first met on that Greenwich Street. "I've been thinking," Hudson said finally, steering toward a secluded cove, "about the foundation proposal, combining the Barros technology focus with your passion for social welfare." Alice's eyes lit up. "The plans the architects submitted are incredible. A multi-purpose campus, emergency shelter, transitional housing, education center, and tech incubator all in one. The Barros Montgomery Foundation," Hudson mused, "has a certain ring to it." "It does," Alice agreed, her fingers intertwining with his. "Though there might eventually be a simpler solution to the name." Hudson raised an eyebrow, his heart rate quickening at her implied meaning. They had intentionally taken their relationship slowly, both wary of rushing into commitment after the circumstances of their first near wedding. But lately, the idea of a future together had begun to feel less like a possibility and more like an inevitability. As they anchored in the sheltered cove, Hudson retrieved a small picnic basket from the cabin. The spread was simple but elegant: fresh bread, local cheeses, fruit, and a bottle of champagne. "What are we celebrating?" Alice asked, noting the champagne. "New beginnings," Hudson replied, "and proper introductions." At her questioning look, he extended his hand formally. "Hudson Jonathan Barros, formerly homeless, currently finding my way back to myself. Completely in love with you." Alice laughed, the sound carrying across the water like music. "Alice Catherine Montgomery, philanthropist, occasional rebel, and equally in love with you, whether you're Eric or Hudson or anyone in between." Their kiss was gentle, a promise of deeper connection to come. When they parted, Hudson reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "This isn't a proposal, not yet," he clarified, opening the box to reveal not a ring, but a delicate silver brooch with a blue stone. "This was my mother's. Admiral Carter kept it in safekeeping all these years. The one Vanessa wore was a replica she had made to maintain her deception." Alice gasped softly, recognizing the significance. "Hudson, I couldn't—" "My mother would have loved you," he interrupted gently. "Your compassion, your strength, your unwillingness to be intimidated or controlled. When the time is right for us to consider marriage, really consider it on our own terms, I'd like you to wear this. Until then, consider it a promise." As Hudson pinned the brooch to Alice's sweater, the sun broke fully through the morning clouds, illuminating the water around them. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. Light after darkness, clarity after confusion, hope after despair. Back in Greenwich, their story had already become local legend. The homeless man who turned out to be a missing heir, the compassionate heiress who befriended him, the wicked stepmother whose scheme backfired spectacularly. The society columns couldn't get enough of the tale, embellishing it with each retelling until it resembled something from a modern fairy tale. But here, on the quiet waters of the Sound, they were simply Hudson and Alice, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and discovered that true value had nothing to do with wealth or status. That evening, as they returned to the marina, Hudson's phone chimed with a news alert. The headline read, "Vanessa Barros sentenced. Justice served after 15 years. The former socialite had received the maximum sentence for her crimes, with the judge citing her extraordinary callousness and calculated deception spanning decades. "Does it bring you peace?" Alice asked quietly, as Hudson stared at the screen. He considered the question carefully before responding. Not peace exactly, but closure. A chapter ending, so new ones can begin. He placed the phone face down. "She took 15 years of my life, but she doesn't get to take any more." Later that night, in the converted boathouse they now shared on Alice's family property, Hudson stood at the window overlooking the water. The journey from homeless Eric to his true self, as Hudson Barrows still felt surreal sometimes. The nightmares hadn't completely disappeared. Memories of the explosion, the cold water, the years of uncertainty and hardship. But they came less frequently now, replaced by dreams of the future he and Alice were building together. On the desk behind him lay architectural plans for the Barrows Montgomery Foundation campus, alongside a journal where he'd been recording his recovered memories. The foundation would be their legacy, a place where technology innovation would work hand in hand with social services, creating pathways out of poverty that addressed both immediate needs and long-term solutions. Alice joined him at the window, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Penny, for your thoughts?" "Just thinking about how a single act of kindness changed everything," Hudson replied, turning to face her. "You stopping to thank a homeless man for returning your bracelet. Such a small moment that altered the course of both our lives." "The bracelet was my mother's," Alice reminded him. "Maybe she was looking out for both of us." Hudson smiled at the thought. "And maybe my parents were too. I like to think they'd be proud of what we're building." "They would be," Alice assured him, "just as I'm proud of you. Your resilience, your compassion despite everything you've endured." As they stood together, framed by moonlight reflecting off the water, Hudson realized that his transformation wasn't about reclaiming wealth or status. True wealth lay in connections, to his past, to his identity, and most importantly to the extraordinary woman who had seen his worth when he had nothing. The legal battles weren't completely over, and the media attention continued to be intrusive at times. But with each passing day, their story was becoming less about scandal and more about redemption, renewal, and the power of looking beyond appearances to see the person within. "Tomorrow's groundbreaking ceremony for the foundation," Alice murmured, resting her head against his chest. "Are you ready for all the attention?" Hudson kissed the top of her head. "With you beside me? I'm ready for anything." And he meant it. From the streets to the boardroom, from isolation to connection, from lost to found. His journey had prepared him for whatever lay ahead. As long as Alice remained his partner in navigating this new life, Hudson Barrows was finally home. Femme de Historia, thank you so much for taking this journey with us. We hope the story of Hudson and Alice touched your heart and reminded you of the power of compassion and the importance of seeing beyond appearances. If you enjoyed The Air of the Streets, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. It helps us bring more captivating stories like this one to you every day. Which character resonated with you the most? What was your favorite twist in the tale? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'll be back tomorrow with another unforgettable story that will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very end.